Okay, yes, I am aware you are recording me. Thank you, Zoom, for notifying me. So, and like in this screen share, like one of the great things can be talking through our process when we are searching for investment income. Because
Right.
like you were immediately drawn to the images, right? The thumbnails on the right that were appealing. Like you saw this river, this stream part here for 165,000, and you were blown away by it. I had not even looked at the images yet. So this is where, you and I might be slightly
Mhm.
different in how we search and pull for investment properties, because I didn't even start looking at pictures until I had gone through and looked at the geographic areas on the map. And that's how I started to pull my refining from 74 results down. And it was just so interesting that you, as soon
Mhm.
as I hit search and we pulled this up and we were talking, it just started talking, you went, well, I'm really immediately interested in that 165,000 right there in that up right hand corner in Wildona, Colorado. And for every person might be different in what they might be drawn to. I mean, they put these thumbnails up for a reason, right? They want you to be um, drawn in. They want you to see the
Right.
appeal. And this is why thumbnails and pictures on listings are so important.
Yeah. And an example of that is so this is when I do a search on something like Zillow or whatever. And they're all basically the same. I like to scroll through the pictures, and then when I see something really special, then I check out the location, and that will determine whether I go forward or not on it. But it's helped me to find some just insanely unique and cool properties, like properties on hot springs and properties, with lakes and whatever. Um, but then, there's no one way to do it. Like some people are really just, you know, the exact location is, more what they need to start with. Especially when we're talking about the investment and we're doing kind of the market research on the investment for these properties, these homesteads.
Yeah, when you're looking through, I want to go down that thread for just a second, because when you talk about just going through and just looking through pictures, what is the thing that will often catch you? Is there something that, is it seeing a lake in the image? Is it seeing wooded areas? Like for me, I know when I'm searching homestead stuff, I do this a lot in Texas just because I have family there, and then we expand out and start talking about clients and things in Texas. And there's just so much land in Texas, particularly for homesteading. I actually look for wooded areas in my images because so
Mhm.
often people just see flat land. And while flat land might be nice where it's already pre-cleared, it limits you in shade, in, wildlife opportunities. Um, and so that's something that I personally look for. What do you look for when you're like just scrolling through? What catches your eye?
So I'm very similar. Basically what I look for the unicorns. Like here in Colorado, I'm in the Denver metro area. Everybody thinks of east of I-25 as the plains and no trees. So I look for, okay, what is east of I-25 and just has tons of trees. And I like to show people something different than what they expect. And it's like, hey, you actually can. There are forests in the plains, and most people don't realize that. Like on this screen you have here, Sunny, my eyes are immediately drawn to that one, Wilderness Road in Utah. With that,
Mm,
it's like a cabin house with all those trees, and I can tell there's some field as well. So as
yeah.
far as homesteading, like this could actually be a really cool homesteading property. Do you want to pull that one up and see how much land is on it?
Yeah, let's
See what the
see.
other photos are.
So this claims 3 acre lot. I mean, look at that wraparound porch. That is so important in that
Oh
kind of
yeah, you
homestead where
need
you
in
can have.
Colorado and Utah, you have to have that shade in the summer. Otherwise, it's like you just don't leave the house.
Yeah, I find this one fascinating because, to have a 3 acre lot in Camas, now I'm in Utah, so I know the Utah market. Camas is just east of Heber and Park City, and everybody knows Park City, right? For the Sundance Film Festival, all the
Mhm.
skiing, all those things. So Camas is really nearby. This is a very hot market. And so to have one with this much acreage for that price point is amazing. Like I could see so much opportunity here because with Camas, you're like within 15 minutes of Park City and Heber and all of the access to all those nice amenities. But Camas is like the next little valley upward. So you have to go through another little mountain pass to get to Camas. And so you are nestled in small town living. You can see it in the pictures here. It's like you are surrounded by mountains, but you really still have that close access. Gorgeous, gorgeous.
So as far as homesteading, having some kind of product or income stream having to do with the land and the property, I see this is on it's on a sloped property. So typically with crops and with animals, people want to have just that flat. But if so, go back up a little bit, Sunny.
Mm-hmm.
You can see it's like sloped on either side. And it would be interesting to see where the actual property lines are. But you could potentially have a crop on that side that has the least amount of trees, depending
Yeah.
on where the sun hits. So that's something you'd want to know about this is, what direction is this facing? What side of that hill is going to get the most sun? You could like chickens are pretty well to be on any terrain. So just look at, okay, what wants to live on this property? What crops want to live on this property? What animals want to live on this property? And you could do bees, you could do goats, I'm sure. Um, you could do chickens,
I
you could
think
do
goats would
certain,
love this property just
I
because
know.
it's hilly. It would give them enough variety.
Yeah.
Because that's one of the things I've heard. People love goats, and yet they need enough space to roam because they're so stinking smart. So you need
Yeah.
to give them some things to stimulate their brain. So this kind of like varying terrain, I think would actually be great for goats.
Yeah. Yeah. In 3 acres, I mean, I was just telling Sunny the other day that we were milking goats for a friend, and she had 5 acres, but she had like 10 to 20 goats, and she was able to give them plenty of space just on a couple acres. So 3 acres would actually be perfectly fine, in my opinion, for a handful of goats, and for some chickens and whatever whatever other smaller types of things you want to put on a property like this.
Yeah. I mean, look at this view. Like to be able to have this as your background at your
Oh
backyard.
yeah,
Looks like they have a fire pit
yeah.
and like a picnic area to the side. There's so much potential for homesteading opportunity. I mean, this is something you can't find very often, especially
Mhm.
in Utah as it's becoming far more popular. A lot of people are moving here. You don't get this much acreage for this price point anymore. And so to be
Mhm.
able to see the opportunity while it is hilly, if you can plan properly, building like tiered beds into
Mhm.
the hillside is a totally doable option. And in some ways, that's actually really beneficial because if you can cut into the hill, it actually gives you kind of like the idea of like a root cellar, right? You get that
Right.
controlled environment from the hillside on one side of your garden, and that could actually be really profitable if you're trying to grow your own food or grow food for your animals or any of those other homestead activities. There's a lot of potential even in this hilly environment.
So, Sunny, you're more familiar with Camas. That's the name of the
Mm-hmm.
town.
Yep.
What do you think about this price, 400,000 for 3 acres and a smaller house like this? is that typical or is that lower? Because I know for Colorado, that's pretty low for something like this.
This is a little bit lower than what you find in Camas, because in Camas, because it's a small town, like this was literally like a dairy town.
Mhm.
My grandma's actually from Camas. This is actually very close
Oh,
to my
that's
heart.
cool.
Yeah, so I've been to Camas numerous times. My grandfather and great grandfather owned a dairy farm out there. And so it really is a small town. So very few people in that area. And so I think it's a little bit lower than what you find there. But you will find a lot more of these in the area, particularly because of the popularity as it's growing, because of the quick access to Park City, because Park City is super pricey, right? You get all of the people who buy winter homes there, Sundance homes, they want the location. And so this is kind of the next top out. And they're starting to see a lot of growth there. In fact, you can see like in the background, you can see this next property over has some like really nicely built, overhangs, garages, those kinds of things. And you can see in some of the aerial views that there is, the homes around it are a little more updated. And so
Mhm.
the value here really is in the fact that you're getting 3 acres for it. Yes, it's a slightly smaller home and it is a little bit on the lower end if you're just looking for a home, like quote unquote home in Camas. You actually are finding them in the 500 plus area. So I think
Mhm.
the value in being so low here is just because the house is smaller, it is older, but the trade-off there is that you get 3 full acres. And there's a lot of them in Camas that you
Right.
do not get 3 acres for.
And so for people who are purchasing a property like this as an investor, I mean, there's a lot of value add potential once can you show some of the inside photos?
Yes,
I'm
absolutely. See,
guessing
you can
it's going
see
to
this
need,
house here, definitely a newer build.
right.
And so I'm sure that some of these other properties around are newer builds. This is just an
Oh,
older
there's a
build.
stream going on the side. Can you go back to that one? I see a
Oh,
stream
yep,
on the
right
side, so
through the
that's
little valley
interesting.
there. I wonder if that
Okay.
edges the property or if it goes through the property. We'd have to read the description.
Yeah.
But
So
as you
there's a
can
lot of
see,
value add
mhm,
with renovating and then adding the outbuildings. I mean, um once you add the chicken coop, the barn, whatever, that's going to significantly increase the value of the property.
absolutely. And particularly as an investment, this, because of the location to Park City, I actually think would be a great rental, even if you're not using it for the full 3 acre homestead option right now. But just to be able to lock in 3 acres
Mhm.
that close, I think you could easily use this as a rental. And I actually know a lot of people who want to try the homestead opportunity, right? They want to be able to see how that transition is before they buy their own homestead. And so this would be a great way to be like, look, not only are you renting a home, and it's a pretty decent home, right? Like it's a little dated, wouldn't take a whole lot to renovate, and kind of freshen it up a little bit, but to give people an opportunity to say you could rent this property as well as experience homesteading to get like your footing, to get
Mhm.
your feet wet and really learn what it takes to homestead as you work towards buying your own property. I think that would be a really big selling point for this. And you would get a really good tenant that would then also in turn, be a really good steward for the 3 acres.
Yeah, yeah. Um, can you, after you go through some of these interior photos, can you show us the map again so we can see how close it is to Park City?
Of course, absolutely. Well, and
So
it
it looks
looks
like
like they
they
use
were
this,
Airbnb-ing it maybe with all these bunk beds.
yes, or a like family reunion spot. Like this
Right.
could definitely be a vacation type cabin where you can come up and experience. Oh, see, a little overhang.
Oh, this is so sweet.
I really like this property actually. And to have it
All
be
right,
so
nobody
close.
else is
Oh
allowed to
my
buy it. Me and Sunny
gosh.
are buying it. Look at
Look at
this. You
that
could fish in
stream.
this stream.
Can you
This looks like a
imagine?
great fishing stream.
I would love this for like family reunions. Can you imagine all of your siblings and all of your kids being able to come up and like have all the kids play in the stream while the
Yeah.
grown-ups are hanging out on the porch?
Oh yeah.
This is
This
fantastic.
is
Manorlands. Yep. So this, I believe, is a gated community. So there's an HOA on it. But to have 3 acres with a stream is phenomenal.
yeah, so we'd have to see if and what animals are allowed here. There's a lot of due diligence to do on a property like
Yeah.
this. So some of the due diligence you would want to do are the animal allowances, rental potential. Can you do long-term rentals? Can you do short-term
Mm-hmm.
rentals? What can be built on the property?
That's
Things
a
like
lot
that.
of things to consider, and due diligence is key when it comes to this. Like, this home was built in 1980, so obviously it is a little bit older. There is opportunity there. But for the property, it's fantastic. And it does say it has its own well, which is amazing in Utah, because Utah is a
Mhm.
desert. So
Right.
that 400, let me make sure I'm on the right one. This 400 property right here. Let's zoom in for a second. So Camas is up here. Oh, wait. It's claiming Camas all the way up there? This, because Camas is actually right here. So if
Oh,
they're claiming Camas is all the way up here, this is like way up in the Uintas. So in reality, see, this is why looking at the maps, and you can't just go by the address, because claiming this is Camas, it might technically be Camas, but this road here, I've actually camped in this area. To go from Camas directly, because if you were in Camas proper, like in this little valley, small valley right here, it really is only 15 or so minutes to Park City, right? Park City's right over here, Camas is
oh,
right
I
here.
see. Yeah.
It's a really short drive up through this little mountain pass to get to Camas. But if you're coming all the way up here, it's like an hour's drive. So it is quite a
Yeah.
ways out.
An hour
Just so
from
that you
Park
know.
City.
You're at least an
And then
hour Park
what
City,
is
potentially
north
90
if you
minutes.
keep going along that road?
If you keep going along that road, you will eventually get into Wyoming, and it does meet up into Evanston. Evanston is the kind of the next city, so it all meets up into Evanston. And if you're going towards Bear Lake, you're going anything like that, oftentimes if you're going not through the main highways, if you're taking a back road, which is a gorgeous drive, by the way, Bear Lake is fantastic, but you always kind of converge in Evanston, Wyoming, and then move upwards towards Bear Lake. So in
Mhm.
reality, anyone who's coming from this area, it's kind of halfway through Camas and Evanston,
Mhm.
gorgeous part of the mountains. And I would
And
definitely love to have a space there.
is there any hiking in those mountains?
Absolutely.
Skiing?
Skiing, not so much, because the main ski resorts are closer into these more populated areas, but
Mm.
camping and hiking is key here. Like, I go camping in the Uinta Wasatch Mountains all the time. Some of my favorite beautiful locations. So this is definitely the place. If you want a remote location that you can just go camp, you can pitch a tent, you can go find BLM land. There are national forests everywhere that you can go. They have tons of camping. This is one of the great things about Utah, is that in our mountains, so many camping opportunities. And it's nice because you're in the Uintas, which means there's more pine coverage. Oftentimes when you're going in Utah and some of the other deserty parts, you get oh, what is it? They're like little shrubby pines. I can't remember
Right,
the name
right.
of
Yeah.
them, but they don't give a ton of coverage. In the Uintas, you get really big pine trees. You do get that shaded area. I love going camping there. I've been going there for generations.
Awesome. Awesome. Okay, so that's a cool example of and then we'd have to look, so as far as homesteading, we'd have to look at what is the elevation. So this is
Mm-hmm.
also part of the due diligence on your on the market research around these properties is what elevations are ideal for what you want to be growing. Um,
Yes. I think a good thing to look at, and a really good reason to work with a highly informed realtor, is because of the network of people and access to information that they have. So while you might be looking at this on Zillow, right? Even if you're from out of state, you were thinking about moving, or even if you're from that state, to know that the difference in elevation from the Uintas into the mountains versus, say, you're coming from urban living in Salt Lake City or in Utah County, where you are in the valley, that is a significant difference. And so your grow time is going to be significantly different with that elevation change. Like the amount of accessible wild food options, if you're allowing your chickens to graze or your goats or anything like that, your realtor can also be a resource for you to get that information to help you understand when you're looking at 3 acres, what is available to you at that elevation, or say in this one in
Right.
particular, in that mountain environment. You may not know. You might be like, I live in Utah. It's totally fine. It's going to be totally different.
So there's a mountain town that I love in Colorado called West Cliff. And it's I dream about living in West Cliff. It's so beautiful there. And there's a lot of ranches and farms. And they say, you know, if you wanna, you can grow here. It's very high elevation. It's a very different climate and bioregion than like Denver proper. Um, But if you want to ranch or you want to garden or farm or whatever, homestead, there are gardening societies, and there's actually an Amish community up there. So they said, you know, do some research with these gardening and farming societies and groups who specialize in this kind of thing, who've been doing it for decades, and they've really mastered the art of cultivation at these elevations and in these bioregions. And you know, you can be successful, but there are very specific methods, like certain types of greenhouses, certain types of irrigation, certain, you know, certain breeds of crops. And you want to look at what is native to that land to see what is ultimately going to be the most successful, and what's traditional to grow in that land.
I think you bring up such a good point as far as like looking to see what grows native
Mm-hmm.
in the space, because that will give you really good clues already. One, into how to easily start growing things that are there, right? Because they've already adapted to that environment. But two, to also like learn from those who have lived in that space for long periods of time. I know in Colorado, as in Utah, there, you know, we had numerous Native American populations that had settled across these lands. And I have always found it fascinating to go and talk to any of the native cultures here to see what they were like,
Mm-hmm.
what was their subsistence? You know, what did they grow? What was the thing that they would harvest? Wild environment in order to survive here, because you know, the weather here can be really crazy. Both in Utah and
Mm-hmm.
Colorado, we have very similar weathers in the sense that we do get all 4 seasons. It can be really brutal sometimes in the winter, but it can be really scorching in the summer. And so to be able to understand how those cycles go, what can survive the full cycles as far as perennial options, I think is huge, huge to understand and to recognize. And that's one of the key differences that I've seen as I talk to other realtors from across the country, or that I work with other clients that are trying to find things in other states, is that, you know, they go, oh, I live in Texas, I'm looking for something in Texas. And we start talking through what they're looking for. And they go, we have so much water, we don't know what to do with it, right? Like I
Right.
dig a hole and I end up with a pond because the water
Right.
level is so high, the water table is so high. And so you have to totally change your thinking as soon as you shift to that different bioregion, because it will totally change your approach and your strategy for homesteading on the space, for growing food on the space, or even raising cattle, crops, chickens, whatever that is, to help you create a self-reliant community within your, you know, within your property.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love your idea of consulting with the native, the indigenous communities of that area. And we actually have a lot of resources and connections to those communities. And they can be the most valuable resource. And you can even collaborate and partner with those communities, to just, you know, create win-win situations with these endeavors, especially when growing on land and producing on land. And I mean, what if you were able to tap into like what wants to thrive in those areas and create a special product that is you know, you can't get anywhere else because nobody else is doing that. Like there's probably some very special, unique thing to that location that, you know, the typical thinking is, you know, you know, what everybody sees at the farmer's market, but then you tap into this very unique product that is, you know, something you can sell internationally because
Yeah.
nobody else is really doing it and it has a
I
market for it.
I love that you think about that from the sense, particularly in the day that we live in the fact that if you find that specific niche, that thing that only grows in your mountain area or only, is really the native portion of what makes your state great or your city great or your mountain great, whatever it is,
Mm.
and that you can then leverage that globally, I think is something that a lot of people don't think about. That,
Yeah.
at least they start out with homesteading. A lot of homesteaders are just saying, I just want to think about what I'm going to do for myself. But a lot of these, particularly where we are, there's a lot of agricultural opportunities that you can then turn into thriving businesses that can sell across state lines,
Oh, yeah.
across country lines, and that you can then, become kind of that beacon showcase of like, this is
Mhm.
what makes my area so special. And then you're sharing that with the world.
Yeah, one product that comes to mind, local to Colorado, is it's called bear root. And I don't know if
Hmm.
Utah has this too. It grows it in native in the Rocky Mountains. And there's another name for it. It's called OSHA. So OSHA is what most people know it as. But it's also called bear root because the bears will dig it up when they come out of hibernation. And that's what
Interesting.
gives them their strength out of being in hibernation for, you know, all winter. But OSHA root is something that specifically grows at a very particular elevation. And it's a medicinal. People use it as cough syrup. They use it to boost the immune system. It's a medicine that you can find in all kinds of products. And so, you know, what if you had a cabin in the mountains and you had a whole OSHA bear root,
Mm.
you know, crop that you were able to, you know, to sell to different producers and you were able to make your own products. And it's very powerful, effective um, medicine. So,
See, I think you bring up such a great point because, like, I've heard of bear root here and
mhm.
I've heard of people using bear root. But see, I just thought that was just something that was used. I didn't realize how uncommon it actually was
Yeah.
until you start having those conversations and then realize, oh, that's a local thing, but has
Mhm.
so much more potential, right? And far reaching opportunities. But maybe no one outside of these rocky areas in the Rocky Mountains would know about it. Like, I just thought it was a common thing. Like, I'd heard of it. Like,
Mhm.
people have said, like, oh, you guys have a cough, give your kid bear root. And I was like, oh, okay, whatever. Like, that's just like a thing. Like, oh, I can go find it. It didn't seem a unique thing until you
Mhm.
just said that. And all of a sudden I was like, you mean to tell me I don't know if you've seen the YouTube guy where he does all these shorts. And he's like, you mean to tell me after 40 years, I just found this out. I feel like that is me right now, where I'm like, you mean to tell me after 40 years that bear root is not a common thing? That
I mean,
that's
coming
not
from the
something that
east,
like,
I grew up in New England. I had never heard of bear root or OSHA in my life. And I came to Colorado. I took some like healing wellness classes, and we talked about bear root actually as also having some spiritual properties too. And I was just like, wow, this bear root, this OSHA is so powerful. I'm so glad to know about this. And now I buy it every single year for like cold and flu season. I always have it on hand. I have a bag of the root because you can just chew it.
that
Um,
is
so
fascinating.
yeah, it's definitely a local thing. I don't know, you know, where else in the country sells it, but I knew nothing about it before I got here.
This is why I love like talking to people from different places. Like, I know that you now live in Colorado, but
Mhm.
you're, because you didn't grow there, like, you're technically a transplant to
Yeah.
Colorado. It gave you that insight because, see, I'm from Utah. Like, I mean, I was born in Hawaii, but my mom and her family, and you heard lineage wise, like, multiple generations are from Utah. And so I take all of these things that are unique in these environments as just fact, like normal, every day, everybody knows them. And so often being able to get that outsider perspective to say, this is something that is uniquely yours within this space, right? This is not something you see on the East Coast, or this is not something you see in the West Coast by the beaches, or this does not grow in the South. I think is so valuable to know. And this is really good education to start learning as you start to look at whether you're looking at it for investment properties, your own homestead, but as you start expanding out, if you are going to look, in ways of being self-sufficient in a homestead type environment, not only are you trying to grow for yourself and make sure your family's taken care of, but you still got to make money somehow, right? You have to still be able to create some kind of income coming through, and to see these opportunities is so invaluable for anyone who wants to try the homestead lifestyle. So this is a really good plug to say, start talking to experts and to start talking to people about the things that you love just on a regular basis, and see if that's a regular thing where they're from. See if that's right, like bear root. Would you have known? Do you know what bear root is? Nope. I'm fascinated.
Yeah, there's so many different steps to this process to really make it successful. Anybody can go out and start homesteading right away. I have ancestors who homesteaded in various areas, and one of the more recent homesteaders went to Kansas with zero information, and it was so hard. Like, I can't even tell you the hardship that family experienced. That kind of got resolved after a couple of generations of testing this out and going for it. But like, what if you could be really prepared and educated and set up for the ultimate success from the very beginning? And you don't have to spend all of that time and all of your resources through trial and error, just trying to figure this out. You could just, be set up set up for success from the get-go, and just be off to the races. That's what really excites me about this process, and working with experts and having some of this upfront knowledge so that you can just avoid these common mistakes and avoid the pitfalls, and just stay focused on the things that really matter.
I think you bring up a good point that a lot of people don't actually think about. And we've said the word due diligence numerous times over this conversation. And I think a lot of people only assume that due diligence happens once you've picked your property, right? So like you've picked a house, or you've picked the land, and now you've got to go do your due diligence. And I don't think people understand that there is a due diligence that you can do beforehand, right? It's the strategy due diligence of, what are my goals? What are my objectives? What am I trying to accomplish by creating a homestead? Because a lot of times when I speak to the homestead community, I'm in it right now because we're looking at potentially doing this ourselves. This is partly why this is on our brain. But a lot of this comes down to not just saying we want to try and give more land to grow our own food, or we want to know where our food comes from, or we want to be able to give our kids more space to have those kinds of opportunities. But when you start asking those questions, those are kind of the key things that everybody assumes. They go, okay, I've made those decisions. I want to start looking at homesteading. There's a due diligence in the strategy portion to say, okay, great. If I want to homestead, how do I want to homestead? What kind of challenges can I resolve, or, at least have like a checklist to look at, that then you can take that checklist with you as you start the property search, right? If you say, we know we're going to do chickens and we really want to do goats, then that will also help to eliminate some of these other properties during that search process. Because if you go, there's not enough land for the goats that we want, or there's not enough land because we want a milk cow, or there's not enough land, or the land is too rocky, the land is too this, or to be able to go, we want to be able to grow these types of foods. Is the soil, what's the soil composition there? Do I know if I will need to add nutrients to the soil, even just to try and grow anything, right? Is it too alkaline? Is it too acidic? All of those things. You can then start asking those questions at the beginning of the search, instead of going, I love this house and I love the land. Oh crap, now what do I do with it? That's a totally different approach. And then you feel empowered because you have a strategy in place to go through. And then instead of going, oh, there are 74 results with my generic search within Zillow, you can then start going through and go, this land doesn't seem big enough, or I need to do additional research. And you can make notes on the ones that you want to
Right.
go to a certified real estate agent and go, I've seen these key things, help me with the rest of the due diligence. That gives you a roadmap so that you're not just going, well, this one looks pretty. I don't know if that land's going to work, but I mean, I like the way
Right.
the buildings are set up, right? It gives you a different set of parameters to guide
Yeah,
you
and
on this journey.
especially with homesteading or with growing crops and raising animals, there's a true science to the process. Like we're dealing with chemistry and ecology. And when you're dealing with a science, I mean, this is not just the economics of a property, right? This is not just preference. We're dealing with science. That's going to narrow it down. Like you might say, well, maybe I can't have pine trees on the property because that's going to lead to a certain soil composition, or maybe I need to have pine trees on the property. And so you can, by working with experts, in whatever field is your passion and your interest, then you can just even scroll through this and be like, all right, I can tell that based on where this is on the map, what the elevation is going to be like. I can tell based on these pictures, what the soil is going to be like, just based on what I can see is growing there currently. And then you can really start to narrow that down. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but it really is, my aunt, she's my great aunt. She's the one who was from that Kansas homestead. She got a degree in food science, and part of that was agriculture. And she knew the exact chemistry that it took to grow, the most luscious garden you've ever seen. And you could take somebody who doesn't have that experience or knowledge and try to, grow something and they won't grow anything. But she knows, the exact chemistry that it takes to produce the most abundance. So having those
Yeah.
resources is so valuable.
I completely agree. And that's something that a lot of realtors, at least when you start talking about buying property, that realtors will often not even address, right? They are so concerned about just the home structure, the home's, compatibility with you. And yes, that is important. But what Sarah and I really want to really drill into our clients is to understand that your home is just one element, right? Like
Mhm.
there are so many other things that are at play with any type of property, that especially for homesteading purposes, right? With this particular search and desire, right? They have a very specific goal for homesteading. And homesteaders in particular, this is why I love the homesteading community, because they really do understand that, like, okay, yes, I do need a home big enough to fit my family, or to, have a barn that I can process the foods that I am going to be creating. But they recognize that those are just one element in this whole wheel,
Mhm.
right? So one spoke in the wheel of all these things that have to be integrated and balanced, not only on their property, but how their property then interacts with the larger environment and community, because all of those impact each other. And so that's where I'm so happy that there's a big movement now for people to recognize, like, how does the bioregion impact my own personal property, and how does my property then in turn reciprocate, impact in the local ecology, right? Like if I'm growing a flower farm, I want to be I want to have a flower farm on my homestead. How might that impact my neighbors? Or, well, do my neighbors have rows of cornfields, and will that impact how I grow my flower farm? All of those things are
Mhm.
considerations that are part of the due diligence stuff that you can then start with and start going, is that an issue that I want to address? Is that something I don't want to try to deal with? What are those mitigations? And it'll make this entire process like 100 times easier if you can just have that conversation with an experienced realtor and a network of experts before you start the search.
Yeah, I think that's so smart, Sunny. I mean, it saves people so much time and energy and resources just by, because once you do that research, you don't have to do it really again. You're gonna have that research will serve you for, your entire process of getting started. So I feel like this is a good start for people who are getting into, who are dreaming of homesteading, who are preparing to take those next steps. Um, so do you have any like last words, or do you have any do you have anything else you want to share at this point?
Yeah, just as don't feel intimidated when you go on Zillow. Sometimes it can feel overwhelming, right? Like with this idea of I have 74 properties to look at, and I don't know how to whittle them down. Aside
Mhm.
from just scrolling through the pictures, going, that one looks good, that one doesn't look good. There are ways that you can build that go, no go list, right? If you've worked with a realtor before, they often will go through that kind of list for you with a home, right? It has to have a master suite, or it has to have a bathroom. Like even on the search parameters, if you look on there, it says has to have AC, has to have a garage or a pool. Like there's plenty of parameters that they put on it when it comes to homes. This is something that I want everyone to take into account, that as a homesteader, I mean, this is great practice, that you have to be able to have that go, no go list for the kinds of environment that you want to create. And then what you think the impacts or what the potential pitfalls might be for those. Because if you can make that list now of saying, I want to make sure that I have a place for goats, or I have enough land that a cow can graze, and then to be able to say, what might that do, right? In order to have that land, I need to have a well of my own. In order to do that, I have to be able to have a certain amount of water shares, or I have to have this amount of space because I want to grow the food that I feed the cow. All of those questions lead to better choices and a lot easier process in filtering out 74 properties to find the 4 or 5 or 6, to whittle it down to half a dozen, saying, I think these are all gold nuggets. These are all gold nugget opportunities, and I want to really dig in deep. And that is the perfect opportunity to have a realtor come in and bring their expertise and truly dig into the numbers with you, dig into those details and say, okay, you have your go, no go list here. Let's make sure that through the really robust due diligence process that we can do, you get the yes on all the things that you absolutely need a yes on.
Yeah, yeah, that's excellent advice. And such a great way to stay committed to your priorities and to stay in alignment so that you don't end up settling for something because you feel pressured, where it's like, oh, it's a great price or it's a great location, and then all of a sudden you don't want to start backtracking on that vision. There's a reason you picked those things, and so to
Mm-hmm.
keep that close by, and to remind yourself, okay, this is why we said this is what we absolutely want, this is what we're committed to. And when you share that with your realtor, then they can help you to help to remind you. It's like, remember, you said you want to have goats, and I don't see a good place for goats here. So what do you think?
Yeah.
uh,
Allow the realtor to be, your advocate for the
mhm.
things that you want most, because that's what a really good realtor will do for you. They are your trusted advisor and your advocate for you to get what you want.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah.
Sarah, is there
Um,
anything else that you would like, final parting thoughts on homesteading or searching for your property that you would like to share with everyone?
so I would say, at this point, after watching this video, and if you're still watching, congratulations, because you've gotten some really good nuggets out of this. I would say take some action now when this video stops. If you haven't already, just write down 3 action steps you'll take today. So that could be an initial due diligence, and answering some initial questions. It could be reaching out to us to find out what should I be asking and where do I find these resources and things like that. So just give yourself 3 things for you to do today, and commit to at least one of them. And then you'll be off on a really good track towards a successful homesteading business, really, that you can grow this as big as you want, with setting the right foundation for yourself.
That's fantastic advice. Couldn't have said it better myself. Yes. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a great way for them to get started, for them to feel like they can really start taking those steps toward a homestead, because it absolutely is attainable. And we are more than happy to help you in whatever way possible. So we are here to assist you, and we hope you can continue on this homesteading adventure.
Awesome. I love it. And we'll be
Yay.
making some more videos, so tune back in for other videos that come up on homesteading and investing and other real estate topics, for people like us. And we will see you guys next time. We'll talk to you soon.
See you later.
All right, bye.